So the purpose of this final session is to allow the person who shepherded the production of the report to reflect on what he's heard today and possibly back to the Bonavero Day as well. And then to give persons from the floor the opportunity to pose questions that may have not been addressed or things. And we are starting about 10 minutes late. If it's okay, we'll go about 10 minutes over.
Okay, I'll be reasonably brief. That's been an extraordinary day, and I have, being a really sad person, I've enjoyed it greatly. But I'll get over it, don't worry. What I'd like to do is talk about four things briefly. One on each of the panel issues. I'd like to talk about devolution in the national sense, some reflections on the discussion of devolution in the English sense, some reflections on the question of social rights, that fascinating discussion just now. And finally, the $64,000 question, what's going to happen now? What happens next? I found this, as I say, a remarkably deep and rich discussion on the Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish devolution, just to focus on it for a moment. But three things came out of that for me. One, the extent to which, in some respects, we're on quite well-established tram lines. Most people have a broad understanding of the kind of thing that will need to be done. There's broad consensus and quite a lot of the stuff on, for example, making intergovernmental relations actually work. Doing it's much more difficult. So we're going, in some ways, with the grain. In other ways, and this is an interesting tension, we've got to hold in our heads both the idea that the UK is a plurinational or multinational state and has to have intergovernmental relations that reflect that, and the extent to which we're also a series of bilateral relationships. And I was particularly struck by that from Katie's contribution about one mustn't forget the uniqueness of each place, and each place has got its particular thing. Ireland is more unique than most, for obvious reasons. But that also offers, it seems to me, an opportunity, and one we had not taken, I think, yet in our IGR. That is how we blur the boundaries a bit between intergovernmental and international relations. Might be rather good for the rest of the UK as well, because having a genuinely sovereign government and there is also the second point of tension is between the principle of subsidiarity, which I think everybody thinks is a splendid principle. I blame the Vatican for it myself, but also the going back to the purpose of the central state. What is it that needs to be at the centre? The one clumsy attempt to do that for the present government, which was the internal market legislation. There is a need for an internal market. No one can deny that. Hitting people on the head with a hammer to deliver it, that wasn't the way to go about it. A fourth reflection on the SWNI, it would be naive to think that even doing all this stuff perfectly makes national questions go away. It certainly doesn't make the Irish question go away. It won't make the Scottish question go away. Other things might, but simply making devolution perfect, that won't do that. But the civil stuff really does matter. You can't do it by the method in the Brown report, which is a wonderful method, and we need to find another way of doing it, some other form of entrenchment. And it's not just that you don't keep a dog and bark yourself, you give up the privilege of barking. Second, on English devolution, my goodness. First, will it have an economic effect? Well, the present arrangements haven't. So trying something different is a good idea. Worldwide evidence does actually suggest that the effective level at which to manage economic development is at the level of some millions of people. There's huge literature on this in the economics world. So I think we should start from the assumption that it's a necessary but not necessarily sufficient condition to promote economic development. And it's absolutely right to say that the potential for benefit from that for the whole economy, if we lift up some parts of the economy, is really very substantial. But, and again, one seems to be going with the grain. Everyone rather likes mayors and combined authorities. But there's a danger here as well that the old government and the new government look very, very similar. They believe in all this kind of stuff until it actually means taking power away. There's a real temptation here when you're in the business of decentralizing power to find reasons for saying that, well, of course, I've really got to keep it. Power devolved is also power retained. I see some temptations of that, most certainly at the moment, in some of the work that's being done. I thought the work that Nyasa described was very good, and I recognised a lot of it and was very pleased with it. But the idea that you're going to have devolution whether you want it or not, mate, is kind of the opposite of empowerment. We'll want it, but they shouldn't be forced. I think there's always a danger in central government, and it's a danger in respect of the Scottish devolution world and a danger in respect of people who think they're accountable for stuff at the centre grabbing control. It's utterly illusory. 1980, those of you who have been Black Report into Health, which pointed out that aims to produce uniformity of outcome do not in fact work. More inequality in health in the 90s. Absolute uniform system that anyone had realised. Uniformity is an illusion. And the claim to produce it is really a claim about self-empowerment, not empowerment of others. One issue which didn't arise there, which I think is quite significant for us, is that English devolution is going to produce a degree of political pluralism. It already has. UK government is very much a winner-takes-all world. You're in the government or you're not. You're in opposition. Once you have decentralised power in England, you can be in government in one place and not in government in another place. And that will be deeply healthy for our political system. It's quite fun to watch Labour politicians in the centre look rather jealously at Andy Burnham for a long time. And now I think rather resentfully at Andy Burnham because they might be the bosses too. And that will be a good thing for all of us. That even if the Tory party gets completely gubbed at the next election, which is highly likely, if we move to decentralisation in England, there will be some Tory politicians in positions that will be good for us. So I think English devolution will be at the top or near the top of the agenda for an incoming government. Let me reflect now briefly on the social rights material. A very, very rich discussion both here and elsewhere. In the end, it seems to me that the principal purpose of the kind of rights that were displayed there are about guidance to government. And in that respect, I mean, in a sense, I take Geoffrey's point, well, if you want to guide government, why don't you just tell them what to do? And rights is maybe a roundabout way of doing it. As Jeff says, that maybe got a slightly more powerful powering way of doing it. My reflection on the discussion today, as I reflected on the report itself, was I think we probably took a bit of an act of faith and say, yeah, there will be a way in which we can use the rights agenda to achieve those. Reflection of the discussion today, there will be a choice of ways. And I think, I'm in no doubt that will be. And I need to apologise to Northern Ireland. I'm sorry we forgot about the multiple human rights bodies. We should have spotted that, and we failed. I'm quite reassured about all of this. One point I would like to just reflect a bit further on as well. In a sense, it's the Stephen's point, but others mentioned it as well. And that is exactly what kind of entrenchment are we trying to achieve? Purposes and what works. And I'd quite like to take a step a little further back and ask ourselves, what's the objective of entrenchment in this game? Trying to achieve by it. I take quite a simplistic view. And the simplistic view is born out of, God help me, reading Dicey. Poor old Dicey took the view that the British Constitution was a wonderful thing because it was so flexible. Parliament could change it on a whim. It rather reminded me of, remember Alan Clark, the Tory minister, rather despised people who'd had to buy their own furniture. Well, Dicey rather despised countries which had to be. But he'd made an important point, and that is that there is a spectrum of entrenchedness from the laws of the Medes and Persians at the other end to the complete flexibility of the new constitution at the other end. And it's a choice where you end up on that. And the mechanism you use reflects and how hard it is to change stuff. Listen to the US Constitution. Listen of the Johnson administrations are too easy here. I myself still prefer the mechanism at the Brown Report, as Stephen said, that there is this question of double entrenchment. You have to entrench the entrenching mechanism, otherwise there's not an entrenchment at all. We propose in particular entrenching the role of the second chamber. And the reason I prefer the second chamber over a supermajority on its own is it's probably easier to make changes rather than harder. Supermajorities are very, very hard to get in our first the past book. And we're not in the business of doing a literal reform here. Don't get me started. Last of all, because I'm conscious it's right, and some of you might be hoping that what's going to happen next? Well, the Brown Commission often strikes me, and it certainly struck me today again, as closely resembling the Bible. Everything in it is, of course, true. Find anything in it that you want if you look hard enough. And I think there's a possibility that the government will cherry pick. And I don't fully blame them if they do, right? You don't have to swallow the whole Bible. You just have to get bits. And I think what is quite possible is that a new government, which will be hit by the problems of government like an express train hitting it, right? There will be the most terrible thump when all the good intentions meet the reality of the fiscal position, the international position, the wider economic position, various social problems that they inherit from the predecessors, that they will find this very, very difficult. And they are not in a position today to introduce a comprehensive programme of constitutional reform, as in our dreams in the Brown Commission. But they will be in a position to move forward step by step. I hope and expect that they will. What the steps are, I have the copy of the Labour Manifesto here in my pocket, so I shall tell you what they are. Sadly, I don't. But there are some obvious early steps. We have to do something about standards. Got to do that. The precise formulation of that, I don't particularly care, to be blunt, because everybody understands the need. We need to set some higher standards. We need to toughen up some enforcement mechanisms. And I very much agree with the point that from both sorts of places, Ireland included, that needs to include stuff on corruption. Edge to become terrible to have to say that. Certainly something in standards, certainly something on English devolution. You can call it take back control, but that's just fine. Okay, what you call it, as long as you start the process of empowerment, because that will have its own political dynamic. The real entrenchment of all of this is the entrenchment of political power. So people who can go to government and say, "Listen, mate, 2 million people voted for me." That already happens to some degree with the devolved administrations. It will most certainly happen with the mayors in the new world. The more we go into empowering those mayors and developing the powers for them and allowing them to develop them for themselves. And actually, first time somebody does a piece of certainly something on the mayors. I think there will be movement of some sort, and I'm not sharing secret information here because I don't have secret information. Force reform of some sort will begin. It won't be done like that. It can't be done like that. Nobody's ready to do it. But there will be a process under which, by the end of one parliament or by the end of two parliaments, exactly what it will be, you know, I don't know. And the Brown Commission was very clear, actually, that we had to do some work to build some consensus on that. And that will take us into how we build into some of the other ideas in the Brown Commission, like the strategy duty. Like the Solidarity Clause, by the way, was a slightly silly name for the idea that government's job was to promote economic equality, not individual equality, but equality of economic activity. I think what you're going to find is that the kind of conversations you had today, first of all, have been very valuable in themselves. Secondly, will be repeated endlessly because there's still a great deal of development work to be done. And thirdly, will in the end guide substantial constitution. Please with yourselves.
Very much.